Josh's presence here today is a great opportunity for us. Josh is an Ann Arbor native, grew up here, went to high school here, traveled after that with a lot of interesting opportunities, which he can share with you. Everything from working for a senator in DC to starting his own company, Evite, going to eBay as an executive, running Skype, and taking on the world's communication giants in the process. So please join me in welcoming Josh Silver. So Josh, I know you do a lot of interviews and you have a lot of great advice to share with entrepreneurs. One of the things you talk about a lot that I really like is kind of the differences between being an entrepreneur and being a CEO, right? And you've been both and been very successful at it. Can you maybe share with everyone kind of your thoughts on being a really good entrepreneur and being a really good CEO?
Yeah, I do think that well, obviously as an entrepreneur you're often the CEO as well, but the outside CEO, the professional CEO versus the entrepreneur, I do think that there's some interesting differences. I mean, as the founder of a company, there's a couple of things that are very unique. The first thing is that a founder can't be replaced. You can hire someone else, but you can't hire a founder. So one of the things that I encountered with Evite is in the very earliest days of the company, we were incredibly close to the customers. When we started Evite, the first 4 or 5 months, when someone created an Evite, we had a little alarm that went off and we could all look at what was actually happening and watch the Evite get created and then get sent, and then we'd actually call the person. How did it go? What did you think? This is before anyone was that concerned about privacy or any of those sorts of things. And we had, we'd interview every single person who created an Evite. We were so excited the first time someone we didn't know sent an Evite. That was a moment for us. So what it created was this really intense bond with our customers and our brand and our value proposition that, later on, the other founders, I felt like if you put any of us in a room and asked us a set of questions, we'd all give the same answers because we'd been so close to the product and the customer for so long. And for employees who came later, and they didn't have to come that much later, employee number 20 or 30 or 40, the company was big enough that we already had different roles and different functions, and the separation between the product team and the customer team was big enough that you never really got that same DNA. So there's a certain role that I think a founder plays in terms of the cultural spirit of the company and the cultural spirit of the brand that is very unique. The other piece of it is the founder as owner, where you have a real owner mentality. It's much more than a job or a paycheck, and you're not an employee. You actually own the company. Any CEO who comes later is inevitably an employee, particularly thinking about venture-backed companies now, where you have been hired by a board of directors and a set of investors to do a job, and you may be incredibly passionate about that job and really deeply invested in that job, but you are eventually beholden to a board without the special status that the founder has. A CEO can be fired. A founder can't. You can fire the founder from the company, obviously, but you can't replace them with another founder. The CEO, though, I think has a separate set of opportunities. One, hopefully you have some experience that's very relevant that you can bring. But the objectivity that a second set of eyes can bring, I have found that in my sort of second career as outside CEO, where I have been able to add value is in really being able to separate the because ofs from the in spite ofs. And the insight for me there is that in the early days of a company, particularly if it's going well enough that you eventually scale and get the opportunity to think about bringing in professional management, there tends to be a belief that we are where we are because of everything we've done in the past. And what I've experienced is you tend to be where you are in part because of the things you've done in the past and in part in spite of the things that you've done in the past. And the opportunity to have enough of a nuanced judgment to make good judgments about the differences between the two is where a lot of value can hide. And one of the jokes I make with my team, that maybe not such a joke, is often the biggest pots of gold are hiding under the sacred cows. So if we really examine some of the deeply held beliefs inside the company, we can often find that we can unlock a lot of value by questioning some of those beliefs. And of course, the trick is to do that while still holding true to what has made the company so great, the unique culture and the unique values in each company. And that's always a very delicate balance for an outside CEO to get right. I think having been an entrepreneur myself provides some empathy for the specialness that each company, each founding team will bring that I do believe is important.
Thank you. For those of you watching on the stream, by the way, we're taking questions over Twitter. You can tweet your question at eLab Chat, hashtag eLab Chat. Okay? So I like what you're talking about, Josh, with the differences in the CEO and the founder. I think both have these characteristics you also talk about regarding just their visibility and how they act and how people watch them. And I think you talk about a really interesting moment. I think you were, maybe you were at shopping.com, but where you had actually changed the way you laid out your office and how you didn't think that would have an impact on the organization. And I think it was a really great way to talk about how people watch the CEO. And even, it's not what just you say, but it's what you do. Can you share that with everybody?
Yeah, that was actually Evite. I turned my desk one day. I'd been facing this way, and I turned my desk to face that way. And my secretary came to me and she said, everyone is convinced we're selling the company. And I said, why would they think we're selling the company? And she said, well, it used to be your desk was facing this way, and so as they were walking out the door, they could all see your screen. Now you've changed it this way and they can't, so you must have something to hide, and if you have something to hide, it's probably that we're selling the company. It turned out that my lead database developer was a very traditional Chinese man who believed deeply in Feng Shui, and he was quite literally losing sleep over the fact that the CEO had his back to the door. That's terrible Feng Shui, and the company was doomed to fail if I had such bad Feng Shui. And it was a very easy thing for me to solve, to turn my desk around and make him feel better. But the insight that I took from that is that when you are the CEO, people are watching everything you do. You don't get the privilege of having a bad day. And you might be frustrated, you might be angry, and you need a place to go and vent and apart. Having co-founders sometimes is very helpful, or a spouse, or some very good friends where you can let off steam somewhere else. But part of your job is to motivate, inspire, and be prepared. And people are watching everything you do. So a lot of it is how you act and the decisions you make, but part of it is also how you carry yourself.
At Skype, you were taking on tremendous levels of competition, right? We all talk about wanting to change the world, make a dent in the universe. But when you're in the heat of battle, when you're actually doing battle with MCI, WorldCom, Orange, or any of the international telcos, who probably had a picture of you on the wall with a dartboard, right? That they were upset that you were giving away international calls, where they were using it as a significant revenue stream. Did you think about the level of competition? Did that frighten the team? Did that inspire the team? Or can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to really fight with the giants?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that competition makes you great. And I'll talk about Skype, and maybe I'll talk about some other experiences. At Skype, we faced incredibly intense competition that kept us up every night, and it wasn't MCI or AT&T or others, with all due respect to them. Our big concern there was would they block our packets from going over the internet, which is what the major ISPs had the opportunity to do. Would they use levers, governmental, regulatory levers, and other levers to compete with us? They had an innovator's dilemma in that we were disrupting revenue streams that were very, very important to them, and so we could give away for free or cheap things that had a very high opportunity cost for them. So we felt very good about our ability to compete and win there. But Google and Apple and others who were very intent in the space, who had a lot of assets, Microsoft, were all watching us very closely and launching products in the space. And it kept all of us up all the time, and I'm sure still does, for the team at Skype. and it makes you feel more urgency, it makes you work hard to do great things. But we were constantly in fear. Google Voice launched before I ever got to Skype. And I think one of the challenges, Google Voice launched and there was a lot of hoopla and then it didn't work. And then they had this other thing called Google, I forget, it was developed in Australia, and we kept hearing this is going to be amazing and it's going to change everything. And when it launched, it actually was way too complicated. Didn't do that. But at some point, one of the risks is you can become complacent, actually, because you've seen enough competition. eBay found this, that eBay had faced competition from classified sites for years in the United States. AOL had a classified site, Excite had a classified site, and MSN had a classified site, and on and on. And at some point, eBay concluded classified sites just don't work. And after they'd concluded that, I'd been sent to the Netherlands to go turn around our Dutch operation. And I found that we were getting our butts kicked by a local classified site. And the team wasn't allowed to talk about that. They'd been told classified sites don't work, and this is just an excuse. And it turned out in this particular market, classified sites did work. They worked great. And in fact, if you were looking to buy or sell something in the Netherlands, it made way more sense to go on this local site than it did to trade on eBay. And we were able to demonstrate with data that in this market it worked great, and eBay actually ended up becoming very invested in classifieds, and with great success. So part of the need is to stay fresh and not let the lore of what had been true in the past necessarily what will be true always in the future. The last little story I'll tell on competition, because I love this space, or this theme. So going back to the Netherlands, so eBay believes the classified sites don't work. My merry band of folks in the Netherlands demonstrate that it does. We go to Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of eBay at the time, and say we should buy this Dutch classified site. And in fact, it ends up costing 220 million euros to buy a company that has 10 million euros in revenue and 5 million euros in profit, and whose brand is based on free. Very similar to Craigslist, but in the Netherlands. And so you can imagine that was a bit of a scary thing to do. That's a huge price tag, and in fact, the biggest price anyone had paid for a company in the Netherlands in God knows how long. In buying that company, we woke up the local media company to the fact that they had missed out. And media companies made, at the time, a huge portion of their total profits from classifieds. So we had the largest media company in the Netherlands that owned the #1 newspaper, the #2 and 3 television stations, 5 of the largest magazine, massive media company in the Netherlands, suddenly decide that its life depended on beating this company that eBay had just bought. And so they launched a site that was better than us, that was completely free, where we charged €6 for some of our listings, and that had massive media support. So every unsold television ad, radio ad, magazine ad, all pointed to their website. And the day they launched, they had 1 million listings, because they aggregated every classified listing they had across the country. So they've got 1 million listings, they've got unbelievable marketing support, and they've got a better site with better customer support, and it's totally free. It was probably the worst day of my professional life when I had to get on a plane and fly back to California and tell Meg, remember, we just paid 220 million euros for this company 6 months ago. There's a new competitor they've launched. They're big, and within 6 months, they will be bigger than us. And in a network effect business, if you're not the biggest, you've lost. So it was absolutely terrifying, and I thought this might have been the end of my, when you're younger, you tend to be a little dramatic. So I remember flying home thinking this might well be the end of my career. And my boss at the time said, I think we need to win in these 7 things. It was very wise. Search engine optimization, customer support, sell-through rates, kind of 7 metrics. And it really made sense to me those were the right ones. So on the plane ride home, I redesigned the org chart and said we need 1 owner for each of these 7 metrics. Landed on a Sunday, called the team together on Monday and said everything we've been doing, don't worry about it, and I don't want to have conversations about your career growth or job satisfaction. You own this metric, you own that metric, you own that metric. Whatever job descriptions you had before, don't worry, that's your job. You have 2 weeks, come back to me with a plan and how we're going to win in each of these things. The team completely rose to the challenge. They did an amazing job. They came back with really exciting, compelling, scrappy plans, and we kicked butt. And 2 years later, that other site went out of business completely, despite like infinite funding. And it's really one of the proudest moments of my professional career. And the best part about it was that we got a lot better. We took a ton of chances we never would have taken without strong competition. We provided a better experience to our customers. We did things like we thought that customers won't like advertisements. So we can't show any ads on the site, but instead we're going to charge €6 for certain listings. Well, you know what? Screw it. I bet they're happy to have advertisements instead of a listing fee. What if we make the site completely free? That's probably a risk we wouldn't have taken. Make the site completely free. Long story short, a few years later, we've got 5 times the revenue with 20 times the profit, and have won in the marketplace by taking a lot of risks because our back was up against the wall. So competition is a wonderful thing, and if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
I want to stay with this for one more moment, because you said something in the flight back home that I thought was really important. Many entrepreneurs, when confronted with difficulties in their business model and given 7 metrics, may start identifying 7 features that they want to build or solve. You identified 7 people and changes in your organization as the first thing. So talk about that more, about how do you think first about organizational structure and people owning problems, as opposed to it's this feature or that feature that is going to make me win.
It's been a real journey for me, and I would say when I look back at my Evite days, back then I thought I was a pretty good CEO, and now I look back and say, I would have done so many things differently, and I was way too involved in trying to solve problems, and there were people on my team much better than me at solving those problems. So, I think the job of a leader is to define the problem well, and then put the right group of people against that problem to solve it. And this how do you delegate well is something we all go through as leaders. It's a learning journey, but defining the problem at a high enough level to leave a lot of room for creativity, but specific enough that the team knows exactly what success looks like and what it needs to get done is something that we all work on and get better in time. And it's something I've spent a lot of time trying to get ever better at. And then make sure you've got great people on your team who are better than you at solving each of these. I was really blessed with this Dutch team that it was just a fantastic team of really smart, creative people who really had a lot of passion for it, and they came back with great plans.
That's great. So I'd like the audience to think of a question you'd like to ask Josh, and be ready for that. I'm going to ask him one more, and then please jump in and ask. We had a good discussion over lunch about technology that's happening, especially in commerce, technology and challenges in security. Can you share, just from your perspective now at American Express, as well as your experience with Skype, where do you see some of the trends, either in problems that are disrupting, or technology challenges, or technology leaps that are happening in the area of commerce and security that I think maybe the audience hadn't heard about?
So I think there's a tremendous amount of innovation right now in offline commerce, where we're trying to figure out how the offline buying experience will get to be as good as the online buying experience, which is interesting because not that long ago, I'm a little older than some of you in the room, we were thinking, could the online buying experience ever be as good as the offline? But the online buying experience is extremely personalized. You've got infinite abundance and yet infinite personalization all at your fingertips. Value is terrific, right? Because you always know the best price is just one mouse click away. And there's a lot of wonderful things. So you're seeing a lot of innovation now in offline retail as we try to think about how to take some of those advantages and bring them offline. And I think that the payment rails can be a very interesting source of innovation in that space, because there's so much data there, and we're very close to both the consumers and the merchants. Security is and will continue to be a real battleground for the foreseeable future. So the bad guys continue to get more tools to get better and better at committing crimes at scale. The good guys, we get some tools too, right? So you're seeing more biometric. Apple's just launched a phone, the fingerprint identification in it, and the ability to know where you are based on where your phone is actually very valuable for helping to keep you more secure. So, we see puts and takes on both sides, but it's, if you're interested and invested in the security space, I think that's going to be a pretty robust space for a long time to come.
Good, good. How about some questions from the audience? Please, in the back.
First of all, thanks for sharing your time. You're a rare individual in that you went through the following process of leaving big companies with other people coming to your current company and making an offer. Can you talk about that situation? How did the offer come in? What did you do next? What's the whole process of leaving what you've started?
Oh, you mean taking a new job?
Well, I don't know exactly what you did with Evite. Did you sell that off or just leave?
Oh, Evite got bought, yeah. So we sold Evite to Barry Diller.
So tell me about the sale. How did that initially become? How did it start?
Oh, yeah. Well, so, on the long list of things I could have done better. So in late 1999, we had raised a bunch of money. We had created this amazing brand. We were an IT company. I'm getting featured in magazines and all of that. And I like models, and I'm kind of financially oriented, and so I'm running all these models. I cannot figure out how we will ever generate enough cash flow to be worth what people think we're worth. And I had no idea that there was an internet bubble and that was going to crash, and I just perceived that we were getting investors to put money in at these very high valuations. And the company just wasn't modeling out that way. Like, we were looking like a small media business. And so I went to, casually over dinner, I had my lead board member and investor, and I said, by the way, I think we should sell the company. And what I did and what I should have done. By the way, I think we should sell the company. We could probably get Yahoo or Excite or someone to pay us about $250 million. And that would be a pretty good outcome for the investors and for ourselves. Of course, he had invested in 5 internet companies, all of which were perceived to do well, but Evite was his star company. When he goes to cocktail parties, he gets high fives for doing the Evite deal. And back then, and this was an absolutely crazy time, but a $250 million sale was not considered a great outcome. It was considered a single, maybe a double. It certainly wasn't a home run. And if, with the benefit of hindsight and seeing the world from his perspective, if the CEO of Evite is saying that he's only a single, what does that say about the rest of the portfolio? So if I'd had a better perspective on how he might see the world, I should have handled that conversation much less casual. And I had good data and reasoning for my point of view, and it was worthy. It was an important enough conversation to be worthy of, some preparation. And while he's my board member, which back then felt like my advisor and my buddy, your board members are actually your boss. Your investors are your boss, and you need to recognize that. They might be friendly, but they are not your friend. It's not their job to be your friend. And so I should have handled that conversation differently. We did not make the decision to sell the company. The internet bubble burst, and now it's April of 2000 and my world has come apart. Maybe I'm off a year, sorry, April of 2001. So this was late 2000. This was late 2000. April of 2001 comes around, and now the world has fallen apart, and the comparables I tracked the company to, like Women.com and iVillage were the two that I thought were comparable to us. And they both traded at a discount to cash, meaning that they had $40 million cash in the bank and their market cap was $20 million. So investors would pay them $20 million to shut down the company and give the cash back. That's what the state of the market was. And again, being young and naive, I had a hard time seeing through cycles and said, this is terrible. I'm never going to be able to get my investors a good return on their money. The honorable thing to do is to sell the business now and get them back as much cash as they can. Because we still had about $10 million cash in the bank, and our burn rate was pretty low. So we had enough cash to see ourselves through quite a ways. And the other thing was that the business model was not going to ever, didn't look like at the time it was going to be exponentially huge and be $1 billion. It was a slow and steady. The good thing about slow and steady is when the internet bubble burst, we were slow and steady. We kept growing. And so again, with the benefit of hindsight, had I been a more mature leader with a little more experience to see us through cycles, I would have recognized that we're actually going to be cash flow positive in about 18 months. We've got more than enough cash for that. The only problem I had was a lease I couldn't afford. Short of the lease, we were going to be break even, cash flow break even very soon, and then grow from there. And while a small publishing company isn't the end all be all, it's got real value. So I said we need to sell the company. We spun up an auction. We got a few of the big internet giants to bid. And we created a process and successfully sold the company, and Barry Diller and his group ended up buying it.
How did the buyer determine value of your company?
So Barry is a very sharp buyer, and his team are very sharp buyers, and they looked at the metrics I should have been looking at, which is he's got a lease that's too expensive, but otherwise this company's growing at a nice steady pace, and there's good inventory to be sold to advertisers at a high value, and that should generate cash flows of the following. And it was a very good deal for him. He made some very good deals back in those days, including Evite, which is my fault. And had we not sold the company to him, it never would have been worth $1 billion, but I think it would have been a $70, $80 million market cap, $100 million market cap maybe. We sold for much less than that. So that's a kind of live and learn. When we sold the company, I decided that I was going to go and either buy or start the next thing. And a lesson that I had there was the tyranny of choice. I came up with an idea, and it only took a week or two to come up with an idea. When you're an entrepreneur, you always see opportunities. This sucks, I could do that better. And so I would go and start researching that. What would it take to build a product around that? And I'd spend about 3 weeks of euphoria where things would just look great. I see a market opportunity, come up with a good idea, and then another 2 to 3 weeks of dismay, where it's like, but wait a minute, now I understand the market space a little bit better. There are actually some pretty good competitors. If you spend enough time researching anything, you can talk yourself out of it. And especially if your bar is anything less than a great success is a total failure. I want to prove to the world that I'm this successful CEO and that, I can do these great things. And so it needs to be hugely successful. And so, the first 3 weeks is euphoria. The next 3 weeks is, I don't know, I'm getting anxious. But actually, while I'm getting anxious, there's a pretty cool idea over there. Wait a minute, this thing doesn't work either. Let me go over there. Ooh, first few days of research feel real good. The first 3 weeks feel real good. And so what I found was that I spent about a year researching a few businesses to buy, a few businesses to start. There were probably 7 or 8 that I was researching over the course of that year. And in hindsight, 3 or 4 of them would have been perfectly good, fine businesses. And if I had just jumped in with the sort of beginner's mind and the naivete, probably would have been perfectly good startup. So there is some amount of just being willing to kind of jump in and trust your gut that's helpful. The message to me was the tyranny of choice, that you got to be careful of that. Why the Evite process had been more successful was my best friend and I had set up a process for how we were going to land on an idea, which is every Saturday we gave 3 hours, and I brought 3 ideas and he brought 3 ideas. And we tore each other's ideas apart. But I'd set for myself 3 criteria for what my company would need to look like. It needed to be uniquely enabled by the internet. So it needed to be something you couldn't have done before. I needed to find it genuinely useful. It had to solve a problem for me that I cared about. And I had to actually think it was fun. I had to think it was something I was going to enjoy doing because I'd been working my tail off on something that was killing me. And when the Evite idea came up, and it was actually, I was calling it togather.com. We were going to send Gmails to gather people together to solve this problem of coordinating and organizing events and activities. It met all 3 criteria. It was a problem I had. I worked 80 hours a week at the time. So I had time on Friday night at 8 p.m. to go to dinner with friends, but I had no time before that to organize it. It wasn't possible before, and it was more than fun. It was actually about fun. It was about the process of having fun. So it met the 3 criteria: good enough, off and running. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what HTML stood for at the time. So only after I had already quit my very respectable job to go try to create something, I had no business plan and no venture capital. And in fact, my partner had gotten very excited about a different idea that he has now built into a tremendously successful company on his own. But it was just me, and that was pretty scary, but turned out okay.
That's great. Other questions?
Hi Josh, my name is Zach and I'm a Master of Entrepreneurship student. I heard you speak a few years ago at the Entrepreneurship Hour, and towards the end, I remember Doug had to cut you off because of time, but I remember your closing remarks.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Your closing remark was that one of the most important things is integrity, especially when dealing internationally. So now that you have a little more time, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
I'm very impressed with your memory. That's great. Glad you'd come to see me again. I hope that integrity is super important, not just internationally, but with everything you do. I guess I've now had the great privilege to get to interact with some very successful people, and at the end of the day, they'll all say it's not all that. At the end of the day, they're still parents. They're still members of their community. Whether you've created the next great thing or not, you've got to go home every day and feel good about yourself, and look your kids in the eye and your grandkids in the eye and say, I actually think I was a force for positive change in the world. Right? That's ultimately what's so satisfying for, I think for all of us. So the people that have been able to do that while holding their heads high, I think, are the people who feel the best about themselves.
Did you ever have to deal with international countries where bribery is common to just get anything done?
I've been very fortunate where the business models that I've worked on really aren't business models that I've not had to face bribery as a personal challenge. I've never worked for a company that sells contracts to foreign governments or things like that. So that one in particular, I haven't had to face.
So talking about acquisitions, and there was rumors earlier this year that you were thinking about, doing an equity investment, taking an equity stake in Foursquare. And you've had a partnership with them for a while, and you kind of talked about data, the importance of data, and that offline experience. So can you maybe give us an update on how you view that partnership with Foursquare, and if you're still considering, an investment in them?
So the question is about Foursquare. I can't comment on rumors or on potential investment, but what I will say is that we have a very successful partnership with them, and I think it's an example of how payments and local commerce can come together in a really great way. So there's a few different people who all need value, right? So on the one hand, you've got merchants who are trying to find a way to get more business. You've got consumers who want to find a way to get more value. And how do we put those two together? So the idea that the way that our product works together with Foursquare is you check in at a local shop here, maybe in Ann Arbor, and when you check in, you see that there's an offer where if you just click a button, you've loaded that offer to your Amex card, and that might be spend $20 and get $5 back. So here you've checked in at the barber shop, and next door there's a coffee shop, and spend $10, get $5 back. Well, that's cool. I'll go stop in at the coffee shop, and literally you don't have to buy a coupon in advance. You don't have to present a coupon at the counter. You simply show up at that merchant, you spend $10, you swipe with your Amex card, and you automatically get a notification saying you've just saved $5. So it's a great example of where I think we can create value for both sides, for the merchants and for the consumers, and importantly, where location. If you think about now this computer in your pocket that actually knows where you are, is super helpful. The other thing that we're using to power this is what we call the spend graph, meaning we also know where you shop. And so we can predict what kinds of offers are going to be interesting to you and whether it's worth bothering you with a push notification or not, because we think you're likely to be interested in the offer. So we think it's a great example of local commerce. Foursquare's been a great partner. I'm a regular player of the game, and we look forward to try to do more things with more local partners.
Can you talk about maybe lessons learned from the first 5 or so hires out of the non-founder pool, I guess?
Yeah, at Evite, you mean?
Evite or just in general, but
Lessons learned. You know, I think one of the hard things as an entrepreneur is defining what great looks like. Because I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who literally will look me in the eye and say, I have hired the world's best CFO, and they say it with not a trace of irony. How many CFOs have you met? Right? You've hired the best CFO you know. And they may be a darn good CFO, but what have you done to really calibrate? So where I've seen some entrepreneurs do a really good job is getting out and just networking. If they're going to go hire a head of search engine optimization or a head of marketing, can I just get coffee with 5 people who are really smart and good in the space? They may not be on the market, they may not be willing to consider getting a new job, doesn't matter. I just want to see what great looks like. I want to have that conversation so I can benchmark and calibrate. I think that's really important. And then one of the balances, especially in the early stage, is the head and heart component. And you will find people who may not have exactly the resume, but just bring so much. We had this wonderful, the person who led customer support for us at Evite was this wonderful young man named Chris. And I don't remember what he had done before, but it had nothing to do with customer support. He had been actually do remember, he'd been a professional motorcycle race driver, and he'd had a terrible accident and was paralyzed and in a wheelchair. And we'd hired him to do something that he didn't have a natural background for, but he had a lot of passion to get back into the game and also a tremendous competitive drive. And he was such a force for our culture. Someone would, I so fondly remember, he'd get an email and you'd hear Chris pounding the desk. Susan is having a problem with her 30th birthday party. Something's gone wrong. There's a bug. And John, you darn well better fix this issue for her right now because we can't let Susan down. There'd be this intense, Susan needs us right now. It's one of these great moments as a startup where you get these things. And from the resume, it might not have been the most natural person to hire, but man, did he bring a lot to our team.
Yes. So I know that American Express has recently created a lot of partnerships with sort of brick and mortar retailers in terms of e-commerce and electronic payments. But I guess from the perspective of kind of like a brick and mortar retailer, like a Walmart, like a Dwayne Reed, when they pursue these kinds of partnerships and when they have their own e-commerce efforts, how can they keep how can these established companies be able to embrace these electronic trends without, at the same time, kind of cannibalizing the revenue from their more traditional business lines?
It's always a tricky place, right? The Innovator's Dilemma. It's a very important book for anyone to read. It's been out there for a while, but if you haven't read Clay Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, it's I think essential reading for anyone interested in disruption. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in the digital space that are very complementary, that open up new revenue streams, and there's going to be some things that threaten your core revenue streams. If you think about Skype and the traditional telcos, I don't envy the person running the long distance business for a major telco when Skype is out there, because you're really trying to manage and decline what is going to inevitably be a business that's going to go down. An example of a team that I think is doing a great job of this is at American Express, and I don't manage this team, so I can feel free to brag about them unabashedly. But we have a traveler's check business. Still today there are people who walk into a bank branch and buy a traveler's check and go to France with it. And there are ATMs in France, and people are becoming more aware of that. But that's a business that is inevitable decline. But if you look at what they've done with that, they've said, what is traveler's checks really about? It's about prepaid. So then they created these prepaid cards. And how do I create a prepaid card that's about allowing me to fund $500 US, go to England and be able to swipe and pay anywhere. It's much more convenient actually as a traveler's check. Then they said, well, how do we take that prepaid value proposition and actually think about it as the checking account of the future, a branchless checking account. And that's now evolved into this product called Serve that we have, which is really saying, how do we serve the underserved communities in America, where the business model of let's put a bank branch in a community and hire tellers and all of that is actually very expensive and results in the need for a lot of fees. Could we create a branchless bank with using these prepaid cards to serve a new community in a way that doesn't have all the fees? And the path of innovation that they've been on to think about, yes, our current revenue stream is going to be declining, but how do we take those profits? Where's the puck going? And how do we innovate in spaces of the adjacent possible to continually move to where the next puck is going to be? I think that team is doing a heck of a job of it.
So it's always just a lot of kind of just looking at the fundamental sort of value proposition and just kind of expanding.
Yeah, where's the market going to move? Where is value going to be created? And how can we find a new way to create value for customers in our segment?
Good. Question back to you.
You mentioned earlier a little bit about culture. Could you speak a bit about the importance of culture and whether it's a creation or an organic process?
The question's culture, and I'm very passionate about it. And Andy Cortez, who runs HR for my division, is here as well. So, of course, it's very important, and it can be a huge strategic advantage. One of the things I tell my team, you don't get a question of should we have a culture. You will have a culture, and now the question is, have you been purposeful about making it an asset or not, right? So at American Express, I came in and I spent time with my team, and on our culture journey, the first thing I did is I pulled 20 people from across the organization together to work with me on culture. And we didn't do it by level, who were the most senior people. I asked around for who are the most influential people. And when you do that, you find that people often pretty much agree. It's these people that everyone turns to for a sense of culture leadership. So I got those people together in a room and said, what are the values that we ascribe to? What are the behaviors of the company that you want to work for? And what came was the usual list of platitudes. And whenever you engage in this exercise, you will get trust, collaboration, innovation, risk-taking. You're going to get, it's always going to be kind of the same list. And I think when I was younger, I probably would have taken us through a process to winnow that list down and said, okay, good, and laminate it and put it on walls. So I think one of the things I've learned is to just go much deeper now and push the team a lot harder. So we took that list of platitudes and we said, okay, risk-taking. What exactly do you mean by that? Everyone agreed. It was on everyone's list. Risk-taking. We need to take more risk. Excellent. This Wednesday, we're all going to Vegas. I'm going to take our entire marketing budget and I'm going to put it on red. Cool? Definitely risk-taking, right? No. So what we got to was ingenuity. What we got to was we will clearly define a problem and define a more ingenious solution than anyone else has. And the conversation that came from that I really like is, it's very in vogue now to say failure's awesome and failure's great and I love failure. I don't love all failure. If you do something stupid and it fails, I'm going to be pissed off. But if you come up with a really ingenious solution to something and it fails, more power to you, right? So how do we define our value? We found that this word, and in fact, when we talk about ingenuity, we said it's about getting a small, cross-functional group of people to attack a problem and come up with an ingenious solution. And there was a lot in that, right? We want to work in small cross-functional teams now instead of big silos. We want to create something clever, not just check the box to say we launched something. We talked, trust came up in every conversation. And I said, what do you mean by trust? And really what people meant was, when I'm sitting in a meeting with you, I don't want to feel like it's my business unit against your business unit, or it's my reputation, my score, performance rating at the end of the year is going to do well versus yours. So we've got to really, it's about one agenda. How do we always act with only one agenda, and that's to serve our customers and win in the marketplace? And so we were able to, by unpacking these, the platitudes were an important starting point. But we got to some much more specific language that was very relevant for us and our starting point and our arrival point. I'm not sure if we took it, and one of the tests that I really like is I think if I took these and applied them to another company, they'd say these actually aren't relevant for us. They're probably not important. We're already doing a lot of them well enough that we don't even need to think about them, et cetera. And then the last piece of it, when we got to these, we got to 9 very specific behaviors. The last piece was a little bit of marketing spin. How do you make it stick? And I took a little creative license there personally, which is there's a show called Friday Night Lights, and there's a saying, clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. I just always liked that saying. So at Skype, I started ending my emails with clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. And it just was something I used a lot, but I hadn't put a lot of thought behind. And as I was thinking about these 9 behaviors that we talked about, it occurred to me they fit very nicely. 3 of them were really about clear eyes. How do I look out at the marketplace and set a standard not to do better than what we are doing today, but better than what is best in the world? How do I not tell ourselves the convenient truths of what we want to believe, but actually talk with candor about what's actually going on? These things are about clear eyes. Full hearts, then, is really about how do I, understanding that, take a few big bets and really go all in a few places to succeed. And then can't lose is that spirit of teamwork and perseverance to go after it. So it turned out to bucket kind of nicely, and it's easier for the team to actually remember those 3 and then the things under it. And you start to hear the language. It's starting to catch on when you hear people, these, are you having a can't lose attitude to that? Are we really talking about this with clear eyes? If you spend time in the halls of my team, you'll hear that language come up a lot. But so step 1 is defining it. Then how do you live it? And a wise person once told me the culture is really the sum of the people you promote and the people you fire. And that's maybe a little too shorthand, but not really that much. So when we really unpack the reward systems of our team, it's nice to say that we want people to take risks and act with ingenuity. But in fact, we have a rotation system that says you're in a new job every 18 months. If you're in a new job every 18 months, are you really incented to take a risk? Is that really what's going to happen? Probably not. How do we need to think about our career ladders now? How do we think, and Andy and I, we think a lot about who are we promoting? Because that sends an incredibly powerful signal to the people about who, what we value in the organization. So ultimately, it will be the behaviors that you as the leader live that will define it.
So we have time for one more question.
Throughout your career, you've made several mentions of guardian angels, mentors, coaches. Can you close on telling us who was your most important and why he or she was?
So I have been one of I have not had a boss I've worked very closely with in the same geography until now for the past 14 years, since I was 28. I co-founder of Evite, where I was the CEO, so I had a board, which is different. And then at eBay, I ran a series of very standalone businesses where eBay was the shareholder, but I was in a different geography, than the CEO. So certainly, Meg Whitman and John Donahoe both took an interest in me and were very helpful to me. Earlier in my career, I had some wonderful mentors as well, but the sort of hands-on ability to be very close to someone is something that I have missed and feel like it is a real gap. So what I'm a very, very active role modeler, and there's a couple of things that I do for that. One is I read a ton of biographies. I've probably read 10 or 12 this year of just great leaders that I admire. They're not even leaders always I admire. There's some military people who I think there's various people who I might think were actually not admirable, but demonstrate leadership quality. And then almost everyone I've been surrounded with I find is really great at something. And I do spend time thinking about I've never met anyone. One of the things that, the only great leader is the leader you don't know very well. The closer you get to a reputedly great leader, the more you see all the flaws. But what is it about this person? What are their 3 spikes that make them especially effective? And are there situations where that might be effective and where I have something to learn? I do spend a lot of time looking at that, thinking about that.
So as we wrap up, perhaps you could just just share some thoughts. You come back here every few years, and we're really glad to have you back, and back in your hometown. But talk about the entrepreneurship opportunity for the members of this audience and the town, and the students that are graduating, and the research, and how you see it evolving, and reasons that there's some significant optimism for entrepreneurship and what's happening and growing here.
Well, entrepreneurship generally, it's a fantastic time because there's huge profit pools out there and it's never been cheaper to fail. So I think if you look at the mega trends right now in technology, it just, it used to cost $20 million to start a company, then it costs $5 million. Now for like $500,000, you can really get in business and get a lot done. At the macro level, I'm not telling you anything you don't know there, but and I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, that I think Michigan has all of the right assets, particularly with the university here, with a great school of engineering, but also a great school of design. So the opportunity to have great design, great product management, and great engineering all in one place is tremendous with low cost. It's, I find, incredibly cheap to get housing here. So your ability to live on a low burn is really great. And then you're in a good time zone. The Eastern time zone, the opportunity to connect with people in New York and other places. You have a good airport. Like, probably you guys think I'm crazy for thinking about these things, but at the scale, when you start to scale businesses more, you think a lot about the infrastructure. What's your tax rate look like? What's your labor pool look like? What's your transportation look like? And Michigan really stacks up really, really well. What we haven't had here is a foundational success. So, hiring people that can help you get to 50 or 100 or 200 employees, you've got people that have done that, and then you get some really big companies. We need a multi-billion-dollar company to grow up in Ann Arbor and have a several billion-dollar market cap. And that will create some number of millionaires who each have enough money to become angel investors. If you look at a LinkedIn ecosystem or a PayPal ecosystem or a Facebook ecosystem or a Google ecosystem, right? Each of those mint 40 or 50 people who are each rich enough to throw 50 and 100 grand into a lot of different ventures, and talent that started as scrappy entrepreneurs but saw what it took to scale and are now capable of coming in and helping the next organization scale. We need that. So hopefully one of you people in the room is going to be the person that's going to help create the foundational startup that I think can really create a whole ecosystem in Ann Arbor.
That's great. Well, thank you, Josh. On behalf of Michigan-eLab and the University of Michigan Center for Entrepreneurship, thank you very much for coming back.
Pleasure.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.